Hello, everybody. Zachary and the Rabbit Squad here. And since it's the holidays, I decided to review a movie for this season, which will be Pixar's Luca. Now, the interesting thing about this movie is that it was supposed to come out in theaters in June of 2018, but due to the fact that COVID was still in effect by the time, but due to the fact that even though it wasn't as bad as when they released Soul on Disney Plus. Since the coronavirus wasn't as in effect as it was when Soul came out, even with that, they still decided to put the movie on Disney Plus as for less risk of the movie flopping due to people being scared of catching COVID by seeing the film. By going to a crowded movie theater or to watch a film. Yet they still decided to do it with Raya and the Last Dragon, Cruella, Black Widow, and Jungle Cruise, which mainly didn't make them look any good, especially when the people at Pixar were especially since people at Pixar around the time that Luca was announced to go to Disney Plus, and more especially around the time when Turning Red got the Disney Plus treatment, and were very angry about this decision. And it didn't help that, but to be fair with Pixar, it didn't really help that with their last movie that they released in theaters, Onward, even though it came out pre-COVID hitting, even though it came out pre-COVID basically, like COVID was still in effect worldwide by the time that Onward came out, but it didn't really start to affect the US box office still while theaters closed in March. Ironically, right around the time Onward came out. But yeah, it didn't help that even with that movie coming out pre-COVID, even the opening weekend was awfully low for that movie. Also, when they decided to switch back this motto into theaters only with Lightyear, it didn't really help either since Lightyear was a major flop at the box office as well. Maybe, most likely, with the biggest indicator being the not so great reviews of the movie. Being the reviews of the movie being not so good, and the whole thing was that it was also not able to garner many theaters across. That's similar to recent movie Strange World. The film was not able to get a lot of worldwide release due to the inclusion of Alicia's kissing scene in the film, which was only for 1 second, but it was still banned in China and multiple places. And multiple other places. Not as much as Strange World, which, to be fair on Strange World's part, they really couldn't just cut that scene. They really couldn't just cut the scenes out of the movie since that was like a major character, since that was a major contributing part to one of the characters in the movie. But with Lightyear, here it was a small little scene in the movie that it was a very short blink it and you'll miss it moment. And I mean, it's not. I mean, they do. It is more in depth of a scene than what they did with Onward, but it's still more of a. It was still a pretty short scene in the movie. But moving on to Luca. Uh, what's the plot of Luca? Uh, so Luca follows a kid named Luca who's actually a sea monster, or in the Italian Ocean, or I think it's in the Italian Riviera. I'm pretty sure. Or I'm sorry if I'm getting any of this wrong. But Luca is a sea monster that lives near a town in Italy that is very against sea monsters, which leads to his parents being very overprotective of him. Luca ends up meeting a guy named Alberto one day, who's played by Jack Dylan Grazer, by the way. Who is also the voice of a guy who also provided the performance of the character Billy or Freddy in Shazam, and also, Billy in the movie It. And while Luca thinks that the surface world is full of nothing but people who want to kill him, Alberto tries to show Luca how the surface world is actually not that bad, and basically him and Luca decide that they're gonna try to get a Vespa to basically run away on their own to have their own adventure out in the world. So to get money for the Vespa, they need to sign into a competition. They need to get into a race that's happening in the town Porto Rosso. Which is actually a pretty cute little reference to, which I'm pretty sure I've heard was a nod to the movie was actually a nod to the movie Porco Rosso. I'm pretty sure I actually heard that it was a reference to that movie. Which is pretty cool. Well, especially since the movie does have a Ghibli reminiscent art style to it. The movie also. So the boys decide to team up with a girl named Julia, who tries to show Luca the magic of school, which of course Alberto is not a fan of. Which of course Alberto is sort of not happy with Julia teaching Luca all this stuff, since that more gets in the way of them going off on their own on their Vespa. Since Luca is now a bit more interested in going to school. And the movie basically follows them. And the movie, he is basically just hey, just focuses on a small plot of them trying to win this race. Now, on to what I think about the movie. I actually really enjoyed this movie. It's a very charming film. Luca ends up being a very charming movie that even though it can that even though it doesn't have like that even though they don't require like big action sequences, that's pretty much the charm of it, that it doesn't require any of those things to be just a fun little it basically he gives you just what you need from this type of plot. And is a very and I'm glad that they just decided to go with a small little story that doesn't need any big action set pieces to make the movie more engaging. And the movie's perfectly engaging as it is, and it's pretty interesting to see. And the movie does have a very emotional ending, and that makes the viewing experience worthwhile. Overall, I'd say Luca is a pretty interesting. Never mind. I still need to get to some more stuff about this film. I'm sorry about that. But on to the voice acting. With the standouts, of course, being Jacob Tremblay and Jack Dylan Grazer as Luca and Alberto. The two of them end up bringing a great performance, and which gives the movie a lot of charm. And it's pretty cool seeing how they and getting actual kids to voice the characters, and getting basically actual like teenagers and kids to voice these characters. Aside from Urkelay, which, yeah, he's definitely not voiced by a kid, but to be fair, I don't even think in the movie he is a kid. Which, to be fair, I even think the movie doesn't even say he's a kid. But it does add a unique charm and a genuine performance from all the actors. Also, Julia's father is probably the best character in the movie. Is probably my favorite character in the movie. Just because he is such a charming and likable character. And you really feel the love and you really feel how much he cares about his daughters and about his daughter, and also later on actually cares a lot about Luca and Alberto. To the point where they actually made a Disney Plus short that follows up on the movie. And Massimo and Alberto's journeys after the adventure after the movie, which is a pretty nice short. Also, this film does end up, but onto a thing that I wasn't, and onto a character that wasn't really that entertaining. Or was basically just fine in the movie. Didn't really have a lot to offer to the movie. Is Urkelay, who is more of the who is more of the antagonist of the film. Who by the end of the movie they have a climactic bike chase. Luca and Alberto have a climactic bike chase with Urkel by the end of the movie, which ends up being just a interesting bike chase. But once again, Urkel is not that interesting of a character. Which, I mean, I don't really think that... Most of the movies focused on Luca and Alberto's friendship, which I don't mind. And so I'll give a pass on Urkel. And so I'll give a pass on Urkel not really being that much of a three-dimensional character. He's basically there just to add conflict to the movie. Overall, Luca is one of the most charming movies I've seen since Paddington. And it ends up offering a great story. It ends up offering a small but great story, a spectacular animation, and some pretty enjoyable characters. And some pretty down-to-earth and enjoyable characters. This is definitely, I'd say out of the 2020s of Pixar, I'd say out of Pixar's 2020 movies, or movies in the 2020s made by Pixar, I'd say Luca's definitely, so far I'd go number 2 for Luca. I still think Soul is a bit better, but overall, Luca is a very enjoyable movie, and for me, it gets an 8 out of 10. So, Merry Christmas, everybody, and see you in 2023.